92.5 WFSX-FM Estero. This is a special 92.5 Fox News Town Hall meeting discussing school security, safety, and guns. An exclusive presentation from the smart voice of Southwest Florida. 92.5 Fox News.
Trey Radel alongside Drew Steele with this special town hall tonight on safety, security, guns on school campuses, and a whole lot more. We've been getting into the politics of the situation, but we want to reset. If you're just joining us again, we have a wide array of people here. Candidates for office, state legislators, also people with the school districts. And with that said, Drew, we now have some people from the Lee County School District also speaking.
Right. We have Jerry Deming, and is Mark Morris still here?
No.
I don't. Okay. But Jerry's here, Executive Director Operations with the Lee County School District. And as we've been talking about, now we look at the legislation, we look at the bill, we look at the law now, and we have everything in place. And so now we have to talk about what we're going to do in our schools. So what are we doing in the Lee County School District?
Well, we had a meeting yesterday with the Sheriff's Department, and they brought an entourage of people, and they always really help us out. One of the first things is we're going to increase our SRO presence in schools. We'd already planned that before this bill to increase all the big high schools. We have 5 really big high schools.
If I may, so the audience listening, SRO,
School Resource
Officer,
right?
And that is a deputy.
It is a deputy from
in uniform
from the Lee County Sheriff's Department, and we're going to increase those. We were already going to increase some, which I was saying 5 of them in the big schools that have over 2,000, because one guy in 2,000, that's kind of tough. But we've done that. We're working on, and we've completed almost all of this already too, threat assessment data on every school, who has single point of entry, who does not, who has red lock situations. What a red lock situation is, where teachers can lock the doors from the inside so they don't have to go out into the hallway to lock their doors. We have done a lot of human aspects like active shooter training. Every school will have been trained in active shooter training by the end of March. We were almost completed with it, and we do that ongoing. And we have our set of protocols, student supervision protocols, where every teacher knows where they're supposed to be every minute of the day now. It's very drawn out. Every school has a plan. Every school turns it into my office, and we review every single one. And then we go out and inspect what we expect, is what you've always said. And so we've done that. The thing we're really excited about is the collaboration and the treatment of mental health issues in the school, and getting more help money-wise for mental health issues, because this is a huge problem in society, not just schools. Schools are just a microcosm of society, and we're going to be able to help some of these kids with huge mental health problems because we just haven't had enough resources. Talking about resources, this bill gives us resources. However, a lot of it is one-time resources and non-reoccurring. So we need to know soon, and I'm sure the legislatures, a lot of them in here, legislators, are in here, we need to know soon, is this going to be recurring or is this a one-time deal? Because we have got to help these kids. These kids are deserving of it, and it's just unbelievable how hard they work. And as I always tell them, we had all of them in a couple of days ago. I forget which day it was, but three from every high school came in. And what I like to tell them is, when I went to school, I never worried about threats and things. I went to school and had fun. My hardest thing was worrying how hard football practice was going to be after school. These kids have a lot more to worry about, and so we've got to provide them with the opportunity to go to school and not worry. And that's what we're working on with these initiatives and many others. I can't give you specific details because I don't want the bad guys to know the specific details, of course.
Sure.
But just to let you know, Lee County schools are working real hard, along with the Lee County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Scott and the undersheriff, they're just amazing people. They come, they do whatever, they help us. We don't do whatever we ask. They come and help us at all times. They're just real good people, and we're really proud to have a great working relationship with them.
And Collier County School Board member Erica Donald's here as well. And how about what's happening in Collier?
Well, we are very fortunate, as I mentioned before, in Collier County to have already done a lot of the things that other counties are looking to do now, such as single point of entry in all of our schools and having nearly a 1-to-1 ratio of our school resource officers at all of our schools, which we up to the 1-to-1 ratio currently, and are maintaining that until we have a new plan in place in partnership with our sheriff's office. And Sheriff Rambosk has prioritized school safety and has worked very closely with us for several years, as was mentioned, back to the 1970s. So the things that I'm hearing from school board members across the state that they need to implement, I'm able to say that Collier County has already been able to implement that before this happened. So a lot of the infrastructure things and the older buildings that need to be retrofitted, we've already done that in Collier County. But we're always looking for ways to improve. The mental health funding is certainly going to be helpful. We already do a threat assessment on a lot of situations that come up where we're looking into that individual to see if they are possibly a threat to themselves or others. And we're very conservative about that to make sure that we do it in any situation that something like this could happen. But having that additional funding is definitely going to help increase that program and also help our partnership with the David Lawrence Center and other community partnerships to implement that mental health support. I do want to, if you don't mind, before we get to the students, and I've worked with teenagers for 15 years. My husband and I have been youth leaders in our church, so our heart is for students and for teenagers. So I really appreciate seeing the activism and what the students have done since this tragedy occurred. I do have a concern in what I'm seeing in the messaging from a philosophical standpoint, that the answer to the cultural ills that we see is more government, and that the government can help us to solve these cultural ills by banning things and by making more laws and by more money. And I do have a concern with this generation being so willing within days to give up their constitutional rights or rights in general, and not just talking about Second Amendment rights, but privacy rights are also involved here in order to feel safer. Because frankly, even the bill that was passed in Florida, although I agree with many aspects of it, a lot of it is, I believe, a false sense of security. Because if you really break down what could have prevented the tragedy, you go down every single thing that the government is going to do with more money and more resources and more laws, and not many of these tragedies over the last 20 years could have been prevented by those laws. So I'm concerned from a cultural standpoint that philosophically our young people are getting the message and also buying into the message that more government is going to help them to resolve these issues. So as we hear from the students, I would hope that they would respond to that as well.
Well, let's hear from the students. And this is this
Shane
Zach?
Broadstone, political science major at FGCU.
Yes, thank you so much. Just to kind of respond to the point that you made, I don't really believe that this is a cultural ill of us being so willing to expand government. Rather, this is something that we've been living through, a fear of mass shootings in our own schools ever since I can remember. Actually, I remember being in middle school. I was in an accelerated program. It was called STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics. And one of the projects that we had to do in my engineering class was to devise a way for students to be more safe in these types of situations. So I was in middle school, even elementary school, thinking about these problems. So it's not that I'm just willing to accept further regulation through the government. It's that I've been living through this for as long as I can remember. And I think, that logic that it's just, kids just being kids, I respectfully disagree with that.
I don't think that she's getting kids being kids. I think that some of the discussion that we've talked about, she even brought in things like privacy and there could be an entirely new show devoted to the mental health issues, what prescription pills people are taking, how that gets regulated with guns, all of those types of things. But
what I meant by that was not saying that kids could be kids, but saying that we don't have necessarily the capacity to know.
Nobody's saying that either. Okay. Look, I would also just to reflect on what you just said, as we're all in this room. Once again, I think that we all want the same things. We want kids to be safe. We want opportunities. And it is utterly horrifying to me that we're even having to do this tonight. It is horrifying to me that I have a 6-year-old who's going to school, and now this is one of my thoughts, and it's his thoughts, and it's every parent's thought. it's a sad-ass state of affairs in the United States of America with the violence that is going on. But what I think, again, she's getting at, Erica Donalds with the Collier School Board, is more like, what do we do? What? Because we are hearing messaging now. I don't want to lump you all in with the young David Hogg, who's been on TV and prevalent, saying things like either funding for the Dickey Amendment or ban assault-style rifles or this or that. He's been going hardcore into politics.
Unless you agree with that.
I would ask. How about, do you feel that there are laws that could prevent what we've been seeing?
Well, if I could just make a quick point about that,
Sure.
kind of bringing back the age limit that we talked about previously. A previous speaker brought up an arbitrary limit, or age limit rather. That was yes. I believe I'm 19 years old, so under this new law, I would not be able to buy a shotgun, and I completely agree.
At a
with
retailer.
That. At a retailer, yes. And I completely agree with that. Simply because if you can't trust me in my judgment to drink responsibly, how can you trust my judgment?
But listen, when you use that, though, you should know that if you want to go have a beer, buddy, go for it.
Yeah.
At 18 years old, are you responsible
Against
enough?
libertarianism.
Yeah. Are you responsible enough to have a weapon at your home to protect yourself if you move out into an apartment or whatever?
Well, if under the eyes of the national level and the state level, I respect.
Yeah, but these are all arbitrary numbers, is what we're getting at. That's why I would go back earlier to my point.
But there
of
has to be a number, is what I'm saying. So what is the cutoff? With that logic, if I could be, is it 21? Is it 15? Is it 10?
I don't know. We try kids we try 13-year-olds as adults, which is insane to me too.
If I could just finish this point real quick. Yeah. If you can't trust me in my judgment to drink responsibly, how can you trust at the national and state level? I respect that you trust me, and I think
most legislators would.
But at the national and state level, that's not the case.
And it's ridiculous.
And I agree with you.
That's almost the same point that people make about teachers. So the assumption is if a teacher has a gun, they're going to be fumbling and stumbling, and it's going to be grandma with the ankle, and they don't know how to use it, and they're going to be dangerous. I don't assume that.
And haven't you just made the point that you're saying it's ridiculous 21, 18 is fine? Shouldn't 18 be fine? But you have to
have a cutoff. You have to have a cutoff. And I believe that cutoff should be 21. Because if you trust me enough, and I say you as in as a society.
Sure.
If a society could trust me enough to go down to the bar and drink, then they should be able to trust me enough.
But let's just throw that aside for a second, because that's also just an arbitrary number. I agree that we as a culture and society do at times decide to take an arbitrary number and say, okay, we all feel comfortable with this. How about you, though, personally? Let's make it personal. Are you responsible enough to keep a weapon in your home, a shotgun in your home, a handgun in your home, in your apartment?
Well, of course, I'd like to say that everybody can trust themselves, but can you trust other people?
I'm asking
other
you.
19.
Yeah,
that's the difficulty. I know that you wanted to speak.
Wait. Let me turn this on.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No.
And Byron wanted
April
to speak
Freeman,
as well.
candidate for Florida 17.
Some people are not responsible enough, and they don't know that until they're in a position where they're getting ready to commit these crimes. They don't know that they have mental illness. They don't know that they are not responsible enough to go buy that AR-15 or whatever gun they're going to use for their crime. They don't know it, and that's what he's trying to say. Most people don't know.
And this, again, gets into background checks and mental health. He had something else. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Exactly. And April Freeman, I agree with you 100%. The thing that a lot of you guys in this room right now have to understand is that up until the time of the shooting, the Las Vegas gunman, Nicholas Cruz, mass shootings all across the country, these were lawful firearm owners. They, up until the point of the shooting, up until the time that they decided to turn their weapon on classmates, on innocent people.
But they knew. But they knew the Parkland shooter's history, and again, the system failed because we
have to do something about the system.
Representative Byron Donalds wanted to say something quickly.
A couple of things. I think the first thing you mentioned, the first thing that the young gentleman from FGCU said is, "Do we trust him?" To be perfectly honest, I don't trust you. I don't trust April. I've known Trey and Drew a long time. I don't trust you guys. It is not about trust. It is about your God-given ability to actually protect yourself. And it is the responsibility, in my opinion, of legislators, people crafting law, not to take the tragedy of the moment and then undo your ability to live out your own God-given rights. And that is the trust factor that really has to exist. What you would say that you wouldn't trust yourself, I almost assure you that there are 19-year-olds up and down the corridor of the spine of this state in the heartland who fully trust themselves with a weapon, have been trusting themselves since the time they were 13 years old because they've been shooting, they actively are trained in it. And so how are we to say that because you have a mistrust in some of your peers at FGCU that same mistrust should be applied to people who grow up on farms every day. You cannot have it both ways. If you do, then what you end up doing is you do not respect the individual liberty of the individual. And what you then are saying is that you are comfortable with eroding liberties because of tragedy. And that is not how you craft law. If the mindset is that you're going to craft law to do that, then we're going to be taking more freedoms and more liberties away. The second thing I would say about this bill is that there are provisions in this bill under the Baker Act system that now you will be allowed to Baker Act people who are threats to themselves, who may not think they're a threat to themselves today, and the sheriff's department will be able to go in and confiscate guns out of their home. That is a massive jump from where we are today. The third thing about this bill is actually sharing information with respect to mental health, because now we're going into privacy issues. We're going into major HIPAA issues. Again, we all want to be safe, but at what point are we going to erode the privacy and the liberty of fellow citizens who don't agree with you? As much as they may respect you, but they don't agree. So the question becomes, who's going to become the arbiter of what's right and just? Is it going to be you or is it going to be them? My viewpoint is we have to have stable law and respect the individual liberty of all people in spite of the tragedies that may come across us.
Zach Rothman, editor-in-chief of Eagle News and FGCU student, also with us.
Yeah, if I could backtrack a little bit. Sure. My colleague had mentioned a point that our generation, or at least my generation, seems to be turning to government for our solutions. And I think that's because a lot of what we see is that the government created these problems. Since 2008, I'm going to throw a wrench into this argument a little bit. Since 2008, super PACs have been allowed to participate in elections almost under the non-instruction of the SEC. And so what we've seen is a disproportionate communication being brought across by the NRA. I mean, in 2016, $54 million was spent by the NRA in electioneering communication.
But do you know that pales in comparison to unions as well as Emily's List and a whole other situation?
No, of course. But my point is...
Yes, it does. In terms of electioneering, whether we're talking the individual donations to members of Congress or the actual PAC spending, it's really, when you look at the grand scheme of things, yes, it's a huge number, but it absolutely stacks up there with a whole lot of other issues, but we always pick the NRA. It's always the NRA. By the way, let me just say something real quick to that too. That, listen, you guys who keep blaming the NRA, fine, go for it. But hear me out on this for liberals. Listen, Emily's List is an organization that also spends boatloads of money getting female candidates who are pro-choice, pro-abortion into the United States Congress. You see, what people don't realize is that guns and abortion are driving issues to the polls. You don't have to be a member of the NRA or receive a donation from the NRA to go and vote based on guns. Just like Emily's List, either supporters don't pay Emily's List to be a member. They go out and vote for one reason and one reason only: abortion. We can look at either one of those as horrific or terrible or good or great or whatever you want. But these are cultural, deep-seated cultural issues in the United States that push people to polls, not a $2,500 check from the NRA, right, or even $54 million in spending. And the
point I'm making with the NRA is that in Heller, which had been discussed previously, is that Scalia, who actually delivered the opinion, actually stated in reference to Miller before that the federal government was able to limit sawed-off shotguns and things of that nature. And so I think that the NRA, and I'm just using them as an example because they are the largest contributor in the gun lobby for
in the gun lobby. They're not a whole lot of a gun lobby, but go ahead.
Well, according to Open Secrets, they're also 154th out of 3,800 organizations that participate in lobbying. Their rank 154.
Okay.
And so I think what we've seen is
what does that mean? When you say, this is, what does that mean to you?
My point is that they're diluting the arguments that otherwise people wouldn't be bringing forth. And it's unfortunate that we are here for the reason that the Parkland shooting had happened, and that's why we're here. But we wouldn't be having this conversation unless that happened. And that's the point I'm making.
Why? Well, look,
go ahead.
There's a whole lot
Jonathan Martin wanted to comment on something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to the conversation. We have these rights because they were given to us by God. And if you believe in God the way the Judeo-Christians believe in God, that's fine. But these rights are coming to us equally to every single American. And if you have a problem with that, you don't understand the Constitution the way it was written by our founding fathers. And that's all I'm going to say about religion. But ultimately, we have a Constitution. We have a Constitution that left out the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment. Our founders were terrified that something would come along someday. There would be mob rule, and read the the Federalist Papers tell you all about mob rule. A mob rule would come around and force everybody to change their opinions. That's why we set up a republic. That's why we set up elected officials who could moderate what the mob wanted done. We have a Second Amendment because our founders were terrified that the Second Amendment, or that our gun rights were going to be taken away by just some legislator to make everybody feel happy. The problem is we have so many stats that are just incorrectly used to push one side of the argument. If you want to talk about there's more gun deaths in the United States of America than any other country, that's fine. There's also more car accidents in cities that have more cars. There's more horse accidents in cities that have more horses. There's more knife accidents and more knife deaths in places where the knife is the number one murder weapon of choice. The United States of America is 99th when you look at homicide rate. 99th in the entire world, which is absolutely incredible considering 5 of the top 10 share basically a border with us with no protection. Look at Mexico. Mexico is leading the world. Honduras, El Salvador, those countries right there can send anybody right across our border with no protection whatsoever. And if I hear one more liberal tell me that they want to get rid of our guns and they want to just ban semi-automatic or automatic, I say you must believe that Donald Trump is right and that we have to have a border wall, because I could literally get rid of all of my guns right now. Every law-abiding citizen could get rid of all of their guns. Every criminal could get rid of all of their guns today. By tomorrow, there will be truckloads of automatic military weapons coming right across our border. And if we want to ban every gun right now, let's have that conversation. If we want to have some island country like Australia or like England, and you think that the guns are going to stay out, then let's have that conversation. But you're also telling me that you're going to have a 100% secure border.
We are going to wrap this segment up.
I think Jonathan did that without a breath.
He did. We're going to wrap this segment up from Cape Coral student Galiapino. Sorry, I'm trying to keep all the names straight. And before we wrap this up, I want to let you know when we come back for our 6:30 segment, also in-house with us recently, joining us here in the studio, is an attorney and Democratic candidate for Florida Attorney General Ryan Torrens, who will join us when we come out of this break. Gali, you have the last word.
Yes. All right. So while we are 99th worldwide, I do want to bring up that among the 23 wealthiest countries, the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care did conduct a study that showed that 80% of all gun deaths are American deaths. So I don't want to say that I'm in favor of banning all guns, but I do think that there's a problem with the system. I agree with that. And I think that in order to find what problem there is within the system, we do need to refund research on this. And the CDC specifically is able to have able to get access to the Bureau of Tobacco, Alcohol, and Firearms system that shows the number of firearms that people own throughout the United States, where the most casualties are, so where the most gun violence occurs. And the Bureau of Tobacco, Alcohol, and Firearms isn't able to give this information to other private partnerships or other private companies that are trying to research this, because that's against the law.
A quick question. You two are very well versed, and I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, anything like this, but I'm assuming before Parkland, you knew nothing about the Dickey Amendment, nothing about the CDC. Really?
That's
okay, great.
No,
awesome.
I've been reading the paper every day since 8th grade.
Have you been?
I read the news as well.
Has anybody with the March for Lives, has anybody been helping organize?
It's been a grassroots efforts from students across the county. It is a conspiracy if you're gonna.
I'm not going there, but there is funding for the one in Washington specifically. Very openly, the funding has come from. My gosh, Planned Parenthood, Empower, Move On, and all the liberal groups. And that's why I think young conservatives are looking around like.
And you realize that, right? I mean, you realize where the funding is coming from. Okay, so are these organizations that you guys agree with? I mean, do you commonly go to these websites and this is your belief, this is your foundation, your convictions?
So I am familiar with a lot of the issues that were going on previously, to address that first. And I am familiar with some of the organizations that are funding these marches, but I think that even though these organizations at the core have their own agendas, I think that right now they're funding something that is an issue that must be addressed. So I think regardless of whether at their core they're pro-choice or they're pro other things that people may disagree with that are attending these marches, I think that the point of the march is to advocate for change that is in regards to mental health, whether you believe in arming teachers, whatever, regardless of your opinion, at the core, it is still the fact that there needs to be more legislation on a nationwide scale, and not just legislation, but also there needs to be a change within the system. So whether that be the school district works better with the sheriff's department, regardless of the organizations that are funding these marches, the point of the march is to advocate for this change.
And Max, just quickly, one question. This is just yes or no. Anybody approach you to go to the Southwest Florida March for Our Lives? It's going to be downtown, right? It's in
yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody approach you that is anti-gun control? That's a yes or no. I mean, anybody in the school say, I want to go there and I am pro-gun.
Yes,
and I
we have a plethora of students who want to voice their opinions.
Well, I'm saying that, but that particular opinion.
Of course, yes.
Okay, yes. Okay, great. Good. No, it's good to know. Okay. All right. It is the Security, Safety, and Guns on School Campus Town Hall. It's Drew Steele joining Trey Radel. It's usually it's his time, and here I am co-opting some of his time along with 20 of my friends who decided to join today. And we're talking about a lot of important issues. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll have more. It's 92.5 Fox News.
This is 92.5 Fox News.
This is a special 92.5 Fox News Town Hall meeting discussing school security, safety, and guns. Now back to your hosts, Trey Radel and Drew Steele.
Trey Radel here, updating the breaking news before we return to our town hall. Senator Bill Nelson has just confirmed that at least 6 to 10 people are dead. This coming after a pedestrian bridge stretching across the street at the Florida International University campus collapsed. This happening about 2 o'clock this afternoon. For those of you even remotely familiar with the South Florida area, basically this is where US 41 stretches from our coast and goes over into Miami, sometimes famously called Calle Ocho. Again, Senator Bill Nelson on the air now confirming 6 to 10 people dead after this bridge collapsed. This is yet again another just absolute tragic situation for South Florida. Which brings us why we're here tonight. If you have been with us for any amount of time during this special town hall that we've had a heated discussion, many different opinions, people coming in from all walks of life. But there's no question that everybody here and all of you listening, we all want the same for our kids, which is for our kids to be safe. We want schools to be safe. We want opportunities. It's just a matter of how we get there. But as this discussion does get heated, remember, this is all policy that we're all talking about here. None of this is personal. And with that said, joining us is Drew Steele, who has been taking over the reins here and helping us drive this show tonight here, this town hall. There is the human aspect to this, Drew. You're a father. Whether you're a father, a mother, at all, I think the sad part about this is the fact that we're even here tonight discussing this. Yeah, and the thing is, like you said, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, and ultimately we have different ways that we want to approach this and outlooks on how we can better keep our kids safe in schools and quite frankly, everywhere, every place. When we talk about different cities, we talk about the crime that we hear about and the gun violence in certain cities. That, boy, it would be so nice if we can focus on some of these cities where it seems like it just gets lost in the discussion. But ultimately, we are trying to accomplish the same thing. That's why we're here. I am so appreciative of everybody who is here, who understands that we have to have this. We have to have this dialogue. There was not one single person that is sitting here right now who is not believing that this has been a fantastic opportunity to speak what they believe is their truth and the way they want to approach everything. And with us tonight, we've heard from attorneys, educators, sitting members of the Florida House, as well as some Democratic candidates for various seats. We've had Mark Lipton, Democratic candidate for the Florida House, April Freeman running for Florida 17. Am I missing anybody else before I get to our Attorney General candidate? All right. Also, I'm sure some of these students are going to be running one day. Yes, absolutely. I'm just throwing that out there, maybe. And joining us now is Ryan Torrens. He is an attorney and also Democratic candidate for Florida Attorney General.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
It's great having you here, and I'm glad that you were able to come here to our region. As I understand, you live just north of us. You're based out of Tampa, correct? That's correct. And where you work as an attorney. My first question would just be general for you. How do we keep our schools safer?
Sure. So, I came here because I really want to talk about what our next Attorney General could do to help that. And one of the pledges that I've taken as a candidate for Florida Attorney General is a lot of people have heard about this statewide law that was passed in 2011 by our legislature. And what that law basically says is that our local governments cannot pass ordinances to regulate firearms. And if our local governments, in fact, do that, the local officials can be fined up to $5,000 and actually removed from office. And so one of the things our next Attorney General can do, and that I would do, is until enough reforms are passed to actually protect our children and our families, is I would not enforce that law, basically grant immunity to those local officials, such as the local counties here in South Florida, to do the things that they need to do to protect our children and our families. Another area where the Attorney General plays a direct role, as we all know about the litigation that's already begun between the NRA and the state of Florida. And it's an interesting situation. You have a Republican Attorney General who's going to defend this law against the National Rifle Association. And so as the next Attorney General, that's another role. Whatever new laws are passed, the Attorney General representing the state of Florida plays a direct role. So I've offered to do that. I'm going to commit to that pledge, hopefully when I become the next Attorney General.
A quick question, actually, just in terms of practically speaking, then, if local,
Sure.
how does that work? If local jurisdictions say that you are, let's go right to what some would call a very liberal city, Miami. Miami says you cannot have a certain type of weapon. You're not, I don't know how that would work. Like, if they say, could they say you cannot carry handguns here? I don't know how that goes with the Heller law, but what if I, as I am permitted, went into Miami-Dade County or the city of Miami then and was in possession of a firearm? How does that work if they make laws and the Attorney General says, go for it?
I'm really glad that you asked that question because, of course, if you allow that, there could be localities, like you're indicating, that could take this too far. And that's why I think it's important that we have an Attorney General who, on the one hand, agrees with Justice Scalia that reasonable regulations are permissible under the Second Amendment, but who will always honor our Second Amendment. I grew up with my dad having a concealed weapons permit. He's a locksmith. He had to go into really bad areas late at night. I would never, ever infringe on people's Second Amendment rights as the Attorney General and would never allow a locality to try to impose a gun ban, to try to impose a handgun ban. Some of the localities had already tried to do that and were overturned by the Supreme Court, and I believe rightly so. I believe in our Second Amendment, and so when I say that I would give the authority to the localities to do this, I mean to pass regulations that are in compliance with our Second Amendment jurisprudence. And a gun ban, a handgun ban, is certainly not going to pass constitutional muster.
An assault rifle ban?
I've supported assault weapons ban, and I say that.
What is an assault rifle?
Sure.
We'll go through
the way,
help us out.
Sure. So just in general.
We got a script. This is good.
What I'll say is, I see an assault weapon as basically a consumer version of a military-style weapon, okay? And what I would tell you is it's not just me, that I actually agree with the International Association of the Chiefs of Police on this, okay? And they came out with a report, and the Chiefs of Police strongly support an assault weapons ban. And they came out with a report that said when the assault weapons ban was in place before. That's kind of scary, by the way.
Wait, before we do that.
Sure.
So describe that. What is? Explain what that would be like. So give me a characteristic specifically. Give me what's that gun?
What's an assault rifle?
Yeah, I mean, just tell me what it is. Give me brands. Give me models. Give me the specs.
Sure. I think one example would be the one that's much discussed, like an AR-15.
And what's the problem with the AR-15?
I think the problem with the AR-15 is its firing capacity, the fact that it can shoot so many bullets at the same time.
How many does it shoot? How's it different from my Glock 19 at home?
Yeah. Look, what I will tell you is
you have to know. You have to know this.
What I'm telling you
specifically, if we're going to pass laws. I'm sorry.
Hold on. If I'm going to come on this show, I expect you to let me talk.
Go
I absolutely will. I respect.
So, an assault weapon was already defined under the prior assault weapons ban.
Okay,
the ban was in place for quite some time until President Bush let it lapse. Mm-hmm. And if I could please not be interrupted, thank you.
No, all right, go on.
And what the International Chiefs of Police said was that during that time, that crimes that were related to assault weapons actually went down 66%. And it's not just the Chiefs of Police. I know it's easy to say this is a liberal thing or whatever. I also want to note that Barry Goldwater, one of the founders of our modern conservative movement, who called himself Mr. NRA, came out for an assault weapons ban. President George H.W. Bush, President Ronald Reagan as well, who still are very well-respected figures in American history. And so I don't see this as a democratic, liberal thing. I agree with those figures on this. And so that is one option that would be there. in addition to others. So
I would say, if my personal opinion is, if Barry Goldwater were alive today, he would not say that he would rethink about what he's saying. But that's getting in again. Look, I'm throwing on the tinfoil hat like I was with the students here earlier about why people believe that they have the right to own a weapon, which is in fact if there's a tyrannical government. But
sure.
Again, let's step aside.
And I want to point out though, that's why I believe in the Second Amendment, because
but I want to get back
to,
listen, you're running for the Attorney General of one of the most massive economies, powerful states in the Union. I'll ask you again, what's an assault rifle?
I just told you my definition of an assault rifle, and what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to sit here and get into, well, if it has 23 bullets,
you
it
have,
is.
But you have to know this. With all due respect, you have to.
Already. Hold on.
With all due respect,
it was already. I gave you my general definition of it, and it was already defined under prior law.
Okay, the definition. Listen, we get to the 1994 ban, but you're saying that
we revert back.
The bullet. I just
hold on. I'm not going to sit here. I didn't come here to talk about magazines and bullets. Okay,
you came into a gun town hall.
I'm trying to explain something to you. We can go back to the definition that was in place under the prior assault weapons ban. Okay, because what the evidence seems to show is that worked, and maybe you disagree with the chiefs of police. I agree with the chiefs of police on the importance of passing this.
So you cited the figure of it cut down the violence of assault weapon assaults by 68%.
66 is what the chiefs of police
The reality, though, is this. And here's where I'm begging you to convince me otherwise of what I'm about to state here and break my argument. Assault weapons are used in less than 2% of gun crimes throughout the United States. They were used so little for so long that the FBI didn't even keep track of them. So when we look at that, one would say, well, if we're going to ban this gun, this type of gun, this style of gun, which nobody's clearly defined, we can again go to the 94 language. But if we're going to do that, you would think that really what we should be looking at are the guns that are killing people every single day on the south side of Chicago, South Central LA or New York or wherever, or hell, anywhere in Florida. And what you extrapolate from that is if 98% of the gun deaths in the United States are because of handguns, one would say ban those. Why not? Why are you picking such an arbitrary gun of choice?
First of all, I picked that gun of choice, an assault weapon, because look, just like Barry Goldwater himself said, those guns are designed to kill people.
Okay? Every gun is designed to kill or to stop or to hunt.
Those are, a handgun is used for personal protection, just like I mentioned my father, who would carry a handgun in his pouch, and rightly so, because he was in danger. You do not need an assault weapon to protect your family, to protect your children, and any good hunter will tell you that they don't need an assault weapon to kill a deer. That's for sure.
Okay,
and we also see some of these recent, but these are the reasons.
But what
we may not agree on this.
You're saying you're basically asking the question: why do you need that anyway? No.
Well,
am I wrong? You're saying why do you need that anyway?
That those weapons should be in the hands of law enforcement. Okay. That they should be in the hands of military. Okay. But what I would never do.
Just so you know, the when you keep talking about their military or killing, they're used to kill or whatever, it's no different from holding a Glock with a magazine in it. It's all a semi-automatic weapon that fires. Boom, 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 boom.
Have you ever held an AR-15?
I've held a gun, but not an AR-15. No. But look, but what I'll tell you though is again, maybe you disagree with the position of the chiefs of police.
I disagree,
and you can disagree with their report.
That you tell me what I
would tell. And what I would tell you is, you can go to the chiefs of police and you can ask them what's wrong with their report, because I'm going to trust my first responders.
I hear you. We're going in circles here. If there's just one thing that I would say is, here's what I think a lot of people fear. Is that what we're doing right now when we cannot clearly define what an assault rifle is, and you have loads of either Democrats or activists who are out there talking about these weapons of military when they're really not, or they're guns that are made to kill people, which of course every single gun is. Here's the fear. When you start legislating based on emotion because something is scary, what scares the hell out of me is when legislators, people in powerful positions, start doing the same thing to the First Amendment because they don't like it, because it's scary, but it's not based on statistics or on facts. And that's a really scary area to get into and a path to go down.
Yeah. And I actually agree to some extent, because I think when you have a situation like this, I am inclined to trust our first responders, such as the police, who are the ones dealing with these weapons really on an everyday basis, instead of a lot of these politicians who really don't have any idea what they're talking about anyways, and who may be inclined to vote or legislate out of passion. And so I'm going to be inclined to go with my first responders on this instead of any politician.
Okay, it's the one side. Sorry, Bob.
Trey, you know what? The conversation, not just here in this room now, across the state and across the nation, is about banning a particular gun. It's a semi-automatic rifle. We know that of the 14,000 homicides that we average a year in our country, 400 of them come from semi-automatic rifles. So if we keep having these conversations and somehow this gets changed, there'll be a false sense of security. Oh my God, there's no more semi-automatic rifles. Now we're all safe. We can't have that conversation. We have to get to what's really happening. Something's happened in our country that young people or older people want to commit mass murders on people, and it's not the gun. There's something going on in our country. Today, less people believe in God than they did 50 years ago. Today, more people are born out of wedlock. There's something else going on. Families aren't paying attention to their kids. Their kids are playing video games. Their parents drop their kids off at 7 a.m., pick them up at 5, and never talk to them. Pay attention to what's going on in your community. Don't think that banning some particular gun is going to make you more safe, because you know what? I want my sheriff to protect me. I live in a community that's guards. I want them to protect me. But somebody walks through my door, I guarantee you I'm going to protect myself.
Okay, go ahead, Max.
Go.
By saying a statement like that, you're inferring that the purpose of a gun is for self-defense reasons only. An assault rifle is not meant for self-defense purposes. If anybody here can tell me why you need an assault rifle to protect your home, please do so.
I can tell you why.
Because someone else will have it.
And not if it's outlawed, and not if it's
just like drugs. Just like drugs.
Yes, it's the drug argument all over again.
See, what we're saying is, and I'll give you a million reasons. Let me give you a very tangible reason of where things go south real quick in humanity. I know that you may be younger, but you certainly remember Hurricane Katrina. Cops were killing people. Cops were shooting and killing people. A Cat 5 hurricane hits here, and this is not tinfoil hat, hey, this guy's way out there and wacky stuff. A Cat 5 hurricane hits here, and you bet your ass that when people don't have clean water, and they don't have food, and they need to feed their little children, that they're going to go find somewhere to get it. And I will protect my family by all means necessary.
See, but that's a fear. But then you talked about before about how there was no sense of security when the assault rifle weapon was banned. But if you use that kind of mindset, then and you say that culture is the problem, then why is it true that in states that have stricter gun laws, there's less
Chicago
has the strictest gun laws in the country?
How do you come up with that?
Do you have disputing data that says that the guns are bought inside the state?
That's the problem. Again, you're going back to the black market argument, where I'd go back to utilizing whether we're talking about the war on drugs or a war on guns.
The black market, they come from states that have lax gun laws.
By the way, what you're really getting at though now is a complete ban of guns.
I don't believe in a complete ban of laws. I believe in strict background checks. That's what I believe in. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that people should have the right to bear arms.
What about an AR-15? You don't have they don't have the right for that.
The purpose of an AR-15 is to kill somebody.
What's the purpose of my Glock 19?
No, that's not true.
Okay. So let's take that apart real quick though.
Okay.
How can you say that this gun is used to kill someone, but this one is used to protect?
Because chances of survival from the shot of an AR-15 is not likely.
No. Do you know? Okay, now let's get into the actual. Let's get into the actual ammunition itself. The AR, as well as the handguns, actually that Secret Service use, have a smaller type of ammunition. We get into the grain count and all of that. If I really want to massacre like Cho did in Virginia Tech, you get me a Glock and a Walther P22, and those slugs are going to explode your chest.
So
the handgun is more lethal.
No, you realize there's 9mm. You realize there's 9mm AR-15.
But the purpose of an assault rifle can disperse weapons, can disperse bullets in a way that a handgun simply can't.
No,
that's not true. That's not true.
It's just not true. It's not true. Any of this.
Well, then let's go shoot an AR-15 and see what.
Let's do it together. Let's do it. April Freeman wants to go shoot an AR-15.
Sure. Again. Candidate for Attorney General, Mr. Torrance.
I think something that a lot of people in this room could probably agree on. We still on?
Yes.
Okay. That we could agree on is that no single issue is going to resolve this problem. There's been a discussion about the extra mental health funding that was provided in this legislation, and that's important and that's critical. There's been a discussion about the background check issue. Obviously, like you mentioned earlier, there were so many signs that this was getting ready to happen. There were so many tips that were provided, and nothing was done. That's a major problem, and that's setting aside the guns. Our system is not speaking with itself. And so when we talk about this, we may disagree on particular items, but one of them isn't going to solve. It really is going to take a comprehensive approach. And I think this legislation did have some good features, such as the additional mental health funding,
and
which is critical.
We would agree on that.
I do agree with that.
Absolutely.
The mental health programs in the bill is needed, and it's appreciated.
All right, we need to
wrap up here.
Let's keep maybe some final comments from folks around the room.
And we want to allow the candidates to go ahead and plug your website so people that are listening, whether they are liberal, conservative, whatever, can go visit you.
I would say my final comment on this is the concern when everybody gets into what somebody needs. It is, frankly, it's none of anybody's individual business to put on another individual what they quote unquote need, which is why we have laws to protect the minority, which is why we have constitutional amendments that protect the rights of the individual, so we don't get into these arguments. The last thing I'll say is I grew up in New York City. I'm not an NRA guy. I'm not a gun guy. And so, but what I do know is the criminals, they always had their guns. And it was the law-abiding citizens of the city of New York that didn't. And they're the ones who suffered.
Thank you. Thanks for having this. Thank you, for coming. I can tell everybody out there, to me, the most important part of the bill is being able to protect our students when everything else fails, as it did in Parkland. I know there's some teachers that would never, ever want to carry. They would never want to go through the training. They would never want to go through the background check that would be necessary to carry on a school. But I know there's some that would. And you want to know it was me or anybody else I know that had a child there. I want that person there, armed and ready to take down that evil psychopath. So I appreciate Governor Scott for signing it. And that's it.
I would just caution young people, don't trust the government so much. Those of us who have been involved in government a long time and bureaucracy, as you can see with this situation and many others in history, individuals should be the strongest thing in our country, not the government. So I appreciate your involvement, and I look forward to seeing your growth in politics.
Candidates, your names and websites.
Yes. Mark Lipton. My website's www.liptonfloridahouse79.com. And I think everybody in this room agrees that people have a right to handguns and support the Second Amendment. I don't think anybody wants to take every gun away from everybody, but we have to have some kind of common sense regulation.
Candidate for Attorney General.
Thank you again for having me. Ryan Torrens, running for Florida Attorney General as a Democrat. You can find us on our website at www.ryantorrens.com. Thank you.
April Freeman?
Yep, April Freeman, running for Congress, District 17. I just want to thank these kids for coming in today. I think they're fabulous. And I think as a mother and a grandmother, I'm here to support them because we've really messed things up and we have to figure out a way to fix it for them and help them fix it themselves. And my website is April Freeman, APRILFREEMAN.com. Hopefully you'll go there and take a look. Thank you.
Once again, this has been just a phenomenal show. We cannot tell you just how much we appreciate this from each and every one of you. Been a bit of a heated discussion at times, but something that I know that in my short time of lawmaking that I learned is policy, not personal. To the students organizing this march, while we may not see eye to eye and everything, I know that Drew would say the same. Our air is yours. If you would like to come on sometime, please come in. We're on in the evenings at this time frame. Thank you all so much for joining us for the special town hall.
And a happy 15th anniversary to Byron and Erica Donaldson. Expected a wedding anniversary here with us.
We love y'all.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great night. Stay safe on the roads.
WFSX Estero.
It's 7 o'clock on the smart voice of Southwest Florida.